Is Daesh still a force to be reckoned with? The terror group claims a deadly double bombing in Baghdad. The Iraqi government responds by sacking its security chiefs. But what can they do to make sure it doesn't happen again? I'm Maria Ramos, and today's newsmaker is the twin suicide attack in Iraq. As shoppers were browsing through a busy market in Baghdad, they saw someone writhing in pain. Many decided to help, but little did they know their acts of kindness would get them killed. When enough had gathered around, the man blew himself up. In an instant, dozens were dead. Then, as others came to assist the wounded, a second suicide bomber did the same. Now, these kinds of attacks in Iraq's capital have become quite rare. In fact, Baghdad hadn't seen anything like this for years. So why now? Well, in 2017, Iraq celebrated after declaring victory over Daesh. But earlier this year, the UN claimed thousands of its fighters were still active in Iraq and Syria. So did the authorities become complacent and allow the terror group to regroup? And if so, how can they stop them now? Well, we'll discuss that in a moment. But first, Adam Pletz has this report.
Daesh has claimed responsibility for twin suicide bombings in the Iraqi capital, saying they aim to target members of the Shia community.
A cowardly terrorist attack happened today against innocent people. The casualties of this attack are 110 wounded and 32 martyrs. The 32 martyrs died at the site of the explosion. The other 110 wounded reached the hospitals and were provided with the necessary medical attention.
Bombings like this are a rare occurrence following Daesh's territorial defeat in 2017. It was the most deadly attack in the capital since a blast in January 2018 killed 35 people in the same busy square.
We were there by the stands. He came, fell to the ground and started complaining, "My stomach is hurting." And he pressed the detonator in his hand. It exploded immediately. People were torn to pieces. A lot of people died.
A second attacker waited until responders rushed to help the injured before detonating his explosive to kill as many people as possible. The government has vowed retribution against the terrorist group, which in 2014 had threatened to capture Baghdad.
Our response to those who shed innocent Iraqi blood will be bold and earth-shattering, and the evil leaders of Daesh will face a force to be reckoned with.
But many people see a cynical link between the attack and approaching elections, which were recently postponed from June to October.
Now there will be more explosions to distract people. Citizens are the victims, while the politicians continue working with their party and their factions. Each of them has their own militia. Every 4 years is the same thing.
Analysts warn that Daesh is gathering strength and wants to prove its relevance through increased attacks. Just 2 days after the Baghdad bombings, a Daesh assault killed 12 members of the Hashd al-Shabi, a government-sponsored and Iranian-backed militia known in English as the Popular Mobilization Units. They played a large role in Daesh's defeat in Mosul. So, are these attacks the early signs of a resurgent Daesh? And could we be heading for renewed instability and violence in Iraq? Adam Pletz, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Baghdad, Ahmed Rushdi. He's the president of the House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation and also a senior advisor to the Iraqi parliament. In Washington, D.C. is Kadhim al Waeli, a former advisor to the US-led coalition forces against Daesh. And here in Istanbul, we have Lahib Higel. She's the International Crisis Group's senior Iraq analyst. Welcome to all of you. I want to go first to Baghdad and ask you, Ahmed Rushdi, is Daesh back?
Well, Maria, it looks like Daesh back. But why is now not before, not after. This is the main question. But it looks like, because I think it looks like is that Iraq has so many problems accumulated, then end up with the double attack, the double suicide bomber. So if you're going to look as a security vision, yes, it's attack for Daesh. But on a political, economical, social aspects, no. It's accumulation of so many problems ended with this blast. Now, we all know also is that Daesh still has sleeping cells, not only in Baghdad, in various governorates, in various provinces, and in a rural area rather than urban area. In a way or another, no one expected is that the sleeping cell in Baghdad will be flourished. We all expected that all those attacks that happened in the rural area happened against al-Hashid, happened against the Iraqi army, against the security forces. It's normal because they all hide in so many caves and in the desert. But attacking in Baghdad, this was the surprise. Just as I said, if we're going to look on a security vision, it's different than looking on a political, social, and economical problems of Iraq.
Okay, so that was the surprise to attack in Baghdad. Let's go now to Kadhim. Is Daesh back? Would you agree?
Good morning, Maria. ISIS or Daesh never went away, still exist. They lost their state, but they did not lose their ideology. And I think the attack in Baghdad, the recent attack, it's a target of opportunity. It's not really, the timing has nothing to do with it. Whenever they have an opportunity to disturb the peace in Baghdad or anywhere else in Iraq, they will do it. For example, Taliban lost the state in 2001, but they still there, they still exist. ISIS, it's ideology. Yes, they were defeated as a state. Militarily, they were defeated, but the ideology still exists. And that's why I don't call it, it's back. I still believe ISIS exists as long as there is an ideology. Iraq, militarily, they're capable of defeating ISIS, but there is an intelligence breach. You cannot prevent suicide bomber in military presence. You have to have a professional intelligence apparatus to infiltrate into this network and prevent such an act like this. Iraq, we know it's a state of chaos right now. You have the intelligence apparatus. They lost their chain of command. Each directory, each entity, they have their own intelligence entity and intelligence service. The Hashid, they have their own intelligence service. The army, Baghdad Operations Center, the BAC, the Joint Command Center, the CJOC in Baghdad. Every entity, they have their own intelligence, and they don't share their intelligence, and they don't cooperate with each other.
All right, you bring up lots of interesting points about security there. We'll come back to that. But Lahib, I want to go to you. Do you think there is a security gap or a security breach in Baghdad?
Of course, this is indicative of a security forces failure. But on the other hand, there hasn't been an attack for the past 3 years in Baghdad in such a location. So I think that the security forces have also improved in a sense that Daesh has been limited over the last few years. The insurgency is still active, as the others mentioned, in other parts of the country, but they haven't been able to get into Baghdad. So, of course, this particular attack is a failure, but at the same time, I think, as Kadhim also mentioned, it is very difficult to prevent a suicide bomber. It is very easy to camouflage yourself. I'm not sure, though, that the timing is irrelevant. I think that even if there was an opportunity structure behind it, it is also very convenient to do it the day after the inauguration of the new U.S. administration to show that we are still here.
So do you think Prime Minister al-Khatami was right to sack his security chiefs, Lahib?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there has been, of course, criticism against different heads of security forces over the years. The question is, did they fail at this particular incident, or has there been reasons in the past that they should have been sacked? The timing of that too would more indicate a political reason behind it rather than an actual necessity at the moment, although many would say that the new appointments are good ones.
Okay. Kadhim, you mentioned many things about security breaches. Tell us more. Is there a big gap, a big breach of security there in Baghdad particularly?
Absolutely. It's not a security, the intelligence, the security's presence. It's right there. If you even have a brigade of soldiers, professional soldiers, cannot prevent such an act like this. September 11 happened in America. The recent suicide bomber in Nashville, Tennessee, and Christmas Day, and it's in the heart of America. It happened. The security presence does not prevent attacks. The security, the intelligence in Iraq run by tribals, by religious sectors, not by professionals. They do not really cooperate. And back in history, September 11, when it happened, the result of it, they created the ONDI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, then Homeland Security, to bring all the security intelligence apparatus from the CIA, the DIA, the FBI, all together under one chain of command. In Iraq right now, they need to have one chain of command to run the intelligence service at all. Maybe the commander-in-chief, or maybe the Minister of Interior or Minister of Defense. That's what it has to be. There is a breach, and we know that. But security, the U.S. presence was 150,000 soldiers in Iraq. Most of them in Baghdad. They did not prevent suicide bombers. There were suicide attacks almost 5 times a day all over Iraq. They weren't prevented, but the intelligence prevented them. In Baghdad right now, they should really have work on the intelligence and not replacing the commanders of those directories. No, they have to train them, and they have to all work together.
All right. So a lot there. Who is to blame? Because if we look back at 2017, victory was declared over Daesh, a very big moment. And yet the UN says that there are more than 10,000 active members of Daesh in Iraq and Syria. So who has taken their eye off the ball? And that question to you, Ahmed, first of all.
Well, just like Mr. Waeli, what he said, it's depend on the intelligence. But the problem is that the intelligence is depending on the people and the support of the people. So the people actually fed up with the whole political system. And they are always blaming the blocs, the parties and the blocs, the political blocs. In a way or another, they are saying they are the corrupted, the corrupted persons who are governing Iraq. So if we're going to talk about intelligence, you need my help. And how can I help you if you are not giving me electricity? If I'm living in poverty? If I'm seeing you making so much money and I'm still in my little house that has no electricity or water. So it's a complicated situation in Iraq. You cannot just making only on a security view, because security view or security professional view, it is respectable in a way when you have a controlled environment. But the problem is that the environment is not controlled. Before 1 year has a whole year demonstrations against the political system. And now looks what's happened is that we're supposed to be to have elections at the 6th of June. Now it is postponed until October. So why it cannot be postponed until 2022? So you can imagine how much people are desperate. That's why when the officers of intelligence want to get data, real data from the ground, they have so many difficulties. Now they are saying is that now we have 15 suicide bombers in Baghdad. And what the security forces is saying to the people, be careful, don't go to crowded markets, don't go to malls, stay at home. It's just like Corona, you know? It become again a very impossible situation in Baghdad. So all those things need to be managed by the leaders. We should have a real leader that it is near the people, that the people already we're going to drift those suicide bombers. And let us not forget, without the help of the liberated areas, the people inside the liberated areas, without their help, Daesh can stay until now, because it cannot, you know, we all know very well that Daesh cannot be bombed always and they will run away. They will stay, and they stayed. But when the people said, no way, we will not accept Daesh anymore, they drift Daesh away. So you can imagine how much it is important to deal with all the problems of Iraq, not only the security basis, it's also the economical, the political, and also the social one.
I want to go to Lahib. Would you agree with what Ahmed said? Where does the blame lie? Who is to blame for these security or intelligence breaches?
Well, of course, it's a failure on part of the intelligence community, and we do have an issue in Iraq in the sense that we have so many different intelligence actors. I think formally at least 6 or 7 under the different ministries, interior, defense, and also others. And within the different groups that are part of the Hashd al-Sha'bi, many of them have their own intelligence apparatuses as well. So, of course, there is a problem because many of these don't coordinate with each other very effectively. And the reason for this is, of course, political. It's also a turf war going on between different security institutions and different armed actors. I mean, in general, I agree with the way that Dr. Ahmed is depicting the general situation in Iraq. But I think to explain why this attack happened in Baghdad now, this is not really the answer. We are not. It's not a question about small communities in Sunni majority areas that are now controlled by paramilitary groups or other state forces to cooperate with the intelligence. Baghdad is a large city, so I think it is more of a professional issue, but unfortunately, it cannot be solved simply by enhancing the capabilities of the intelligence community or the security forces, because there are political structures behind.
Okay, and Lahib, I just want to stay with you. Is the US to blame? Because last year, the US-led coalition, they announced that Iraq's army was capable of fighting Daesh remnants on its own, and they pulled out of 8 bases across the country and reduced troops. Was that a mistake?
It is not a US failure that this happens in Baghdad. But of course, in general, to defeat Daesh, the withdrawal from some of the forward bases in Nainawa, in Kirkuk, in other areas has, of course, impacted the way that intelligence is shared from the coalition forces to the Iraqi security forces. Was that a mistake? Perhaps. I mean, if you speak to the coalition forces today, I think they would still say that the Iraqi security forces are on the right track, but they cannot solve every issue that the Iraqi security forces have. And again, I think that it's not so much an issue only of how professional they are or how capable they are. It is also, political struggles between various parties that are influencing the different security institutions.
All right. So how should the government respond now? That question to you, Kadhim. The Prime Minister has sacked his intelligence chiefs. And he says he will personally oversee reforms to, quote, the challenges, that's the word he's using or has been translated to address the intelligence, the challenges facing intelligence services. So what should the government do, Kadhim?
Put them all in one chain of command, and firing the director and commanders without professional replacement, that's another mistake, because you created a gap. And if there is every attack by ISIS, the consequences will be firing the commanders, then ISIS will win, because that's what ISIS want to have a gap in the chain of command. So they should really have to have one chain of command, one office to run all the intelligence. Firing commanders, not the solution. In the Civil War, when George McClellan lost the Battle of Manassas in 1861, he was replaced by someone who's better than him, someone who tied in the West Point. That's how you replace commanders, not just fire him as a consequences. Therefore, Mr. Kadhimi He's the director of the intelligence service. So he's a professional. He came from this community. He needs to really have a professional trainings. He needs to cooperate either with America, with the EU, or with the Arab nations to reform the intelligence apparatus in Iraq.
And is the death penalty the answer? Because the president wants to execute 340 people for terrorism or criminal acts. Ahmed, that question to you.
Well, we must all submit to one fact, is that corruption have been entered in every sector in Iraq. It's not only the financial sector, it's also in the political sector, it's also in the judiciary sector, it's also in the security sector. And we all know that how much corruption is deep now in Iraq. So you cannot just say corruption is not the main factor that
okay, but we're talking about the death penalty
on those
here.
sectors.
The death
you cannot
penalty.
just say that.
Okay, we're talking about the death penalty.
Which means what? Which means that even the death penalties, even the death penalties, you must, in a way or another, you should know exactly what's happening before the death penalties. You should actually study all cases in a way or another to say it is those are regarded to have death penalties. Just as I said, we're going to see so many things before elections, and because of elections will be postponed, we're going to see more and more surprises. One of them is that you're going to say, okay, what's happening is that the prime minister one day will say, okay, guys, I'm fed up. All my personals are not effective because there will be so many attacks. If it will happen, what we're going to do at that time. So you can imagine how much it's complicated. You cannot just say it is the exact factor that's happening in Iraq because it's a very complicated situation.
Does Iraq need help, and how can Biden help? Kadhim.
Iraq needs help by all aspects, everything. Biden cannot help until Iraqis help themselves, until the Iraqis, they put their own agenda and they submit it to Mr. Biden. This is what we need. Iraq does not need 101st Division or the 82nd Division. They don't need U.S. Army. They don't need, but they need the intelligence reformers. They need the technological capabilities. We're in an era doesn't need boots on the ground. We need, Iraq needs technological assistance from the U.S.
But you have some concerns about Iraq having that technology, correct? Because that technology
Absolutely.
could be transferred to countries that maybe the U.S. doesn't want to have.
Absolutely. Therefore, they should be, just like in the Gulf, there are offices or centers, the center of cooperation, intelligence cooperation between the U.S. and the Gulf state, one of them in Saudi Arabia also, one of them in UAE. That's what we need. It has to be, the technology has to be supervised by U.S. personnel or someone who is trusted by the U.S. Therefore, if the U.S. gave any technological devices or any technological enhancement to the Iraqis, it will end up maybe in China, will end up in Iran. All those adversaries, they might take advantage of these devices. That's why this should be the center of cooperation, and it should be requested by the Iraqi government, and it should be guaranteed by the Iraqi government.
Are we going to see more of these attacks? Would you say Daesh is back, and how will they be operating from now on? That question to you, Lahib.
I think that unfortunately we will see more attacks, not necessarily of this kind or in this location. Again, I think that there is an effort to prevent it, of course. But as was stated earlier, we are going towards elections. There are different parties to this conflict that is still ongoing in Iraq that have an interest in stoking tensions ahead of elections. And I think this is the opportunity that Daesh has to to continue justify their presence, not just in the areas where they continue their insurgency, but also across Iraq. It doesn't mean that there's going to be a large increase. I don't think that the capability is there. But unfortunately, I think that the attempts will increase throughout this year and beyond it.
We'll leave it there. To all of you, thank you very much indeed. Lahib Higel, thank you very much. Kadhim al Waeli and Ahmed Rushdi, thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers today. And thank you, our audience. See you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.